What's up, everybody? I'm Finn McKenty. This is the Punk Rock MBA, and today I'm going to address a group of bands that a lot of people have asked me about: Black Dahlia Murder, August Burns Red, Parkway Drive, and Every Time I Die. Because I actually think that these bands are kind of like the template for what every band should aspire to be. I mean, maybe they're not the biggest bands in the whole world, but they're doing really well for themselves, and they have tons of passionate fans all over the world who basically lay down and die for them, right? Maybe they're not playing stadiums and flying around in private jets, but they are making a living playing the music that they love, and I don't know, I think that's pretty cool. And in this video, I'm going to get into the details of exactly how they did it, and more importantly, what you can learn from it and apply to your own projects. But first, I want to thank Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. Not exactly what you expect when you think of mobile RPG, right? That's because Raid Shadow Legends was designed from the ground up with the goal of matching AAA console RPGs as far as graphics, story, and production, and as you can see, they did a pretty damn good job. It has a deep storyline, slick 3D graphics, tons of bosses to wrestle with, and over 400 champions for you to collect and personally customize. And it's a free download for iOS and Android. If you've watched my other videos, you know that I love some old school console RPGs, and that is definitely what they were going for with this one, with the added bonus that now it's on your phone. You can find me in the game under the nickname PRMBA, and feel free to send me an invite to join my clan. Go to the video description, click on the special links, and you will instantly get 50,000 silver and a free epic champion as part of the new player program to start your journey. Good luck, and I'll see you there. Also, for anybody who may not have noticed, I did launch a Patreon, so check that out if you're interested. And with that out of the way, let's get into it. Part 1. Stars are born, not made. Now, before I get into the details, let me first just kind of lay out how I see things to give you an idea of exactly why I admire these bands so much. The inconvenient truth that nobody wants to admit is very simply that not everybody has what it takes to make it in music. I know that's kind of a bitter pill to swallow, the idea that some of us are born with more talent than others, but that's just a fact of life. A big part of what makes stars stars really comes down to the natural gifts that they have in terms of charisma and also musical talent. Really, you're kind of either born with it or you're not. For example, a big part of what makes somebody like Oli Sykes, Pete Wentz, or Hayley Williams who they are is that they're really good-looking people. They won the genetic lottery of being born with a pretty face. And the same is true of musical talent as well. For example, the pop artist Charli XCX, she has just this insane ability to basically barf out chart-topping pop hits. For example, she wrote that Iconopop I Don't Care, I Love It song in an hour when she was 19 or 20. Or as another example from the rock and metal world, Caleb from Beartooth. He is another one of these just seriously freak talents. Their first couple releases are literally all Caleb. He wrote everything on those albums with the exception of the chorus for the song In Between. Not only did he write all of it, but he also played all the instruments and recorded and mixed those albums. Crazy, right? And oh, did I mention that he wasn't even 25 when he did all of that? I could go on and on, but you get the idea. People like them are just freaks of nature. They were just born with a level of talent that most of us simply don't have. But my point is that regardless of how much work you put in, talent will ultimately dictate how far you can go. It's really no different than sports. No matter how much I practice, I'm never going to be able to play basketball like LeBron. I'm never going to be able to do jiu-jitsu like Marcelo Garcia. And no matter how hard I work at music, I'm just never going to be as good at it as Caleb or Charli XCX. And obviously when it comes to facial aesthetics, I certainly don't look as good as Oli Sykes, and there's really not a lot I can do in that department either. What does that mean for the rest of us who weren't born with a beautiful face or freak musical talent? Are we just fucked and we're doomed to be failures or nobodies forever just because we didn't win the genetic luck of the draw? And also, what the hell does this have to do with Parkway Drive and Every Time I Die? Well, that brings me to part 2, just a bunch of regular guys. Now, where this ties into the bands that I'm talking about in this video is that basically, I don't think that any of them are born with the kind of freakish talent that I just talked about. And also, let's just be honest, none of them are as pretty as Oli Sykes or Hayley Williams, right? And actually, here's the main point of this video. The fact that they've achieved what they have while basically being just regular guys who work really hard, that is exactly why I respect them as much as I do. First of all, the Black Dahlia Murder. Basically, I see these guys as the ultimate example of a band that does an A+ job of playing B+ song. Now, don't get me wrong, they're obviously tight as hell, and I have a couple friends who have recorded them, and from what I'm told, they show up and nail their shit in 1 or 2 or maybe 3 takes, which is no fucking joke with material this dense and fast. Like I said, they definitely do an A+ job of playing the material. But that said, I don't hear a lot of hooks in their songs. To me, their songs are more like a collection of cool riffs than they are actual songs. And they're certainly not bad songs by any means. I'm just saying they don't have like a hit single in their catalog. They don't have a Hammer Smashed Face or a God of Emptiness. They also don't have any kind of flashy image or any gimmick like, say, Ghost or Behemoth. They're really just normal guys who don't look any different than the guys in the crowd. And again, that's not a criticism at all. My point is just that any success that they have is due purely to their music. And next, August Burns Red. I think of this band as essentially the metalcore equivalent of the Black Dahlia Murder. Like the Black Dahlia Murder, they're really solid players, especially their drummer Matt, who is just a total savage. But like the Black Dahlia Murder, I think their songs can kind of go a little bit in the collection of riffs direction, and I really just don't hear a lot of standout songs as compared to, say, Killswitch Engage, who I consider as probably the best songwriters in that kind of cohort of metalcore bands. And once again, no flashy image or gimmick. They really just look exactly like who they are, which is a bunch of dudes from Pennsylvania who like to get together and jam some metalcore. And next, Every Time I Die. Now, these guys have actually evolved quite a bit since I first heard them, which I think was on the Hellfest 2001 DVD. Back then, they sounded a lot more like Dead Guy or Botch, and since then, I actually think they've gotten quite a bit better in the songwriting department. But still, they're consistently very good. They've never put out anything bad, but I would say they've also never put out anything that's like truly exceptional and innovative that's gonna get traction beyond their existing fan base. And lastly, Parkway Drive. These guys are the biggest of what I'm calling this cohort of, I guess, blue-collar metal bands. As of the time I'm making this video, they have 1.1 million listeners on Spotify, which is really great for a 2000s metalcore band. And that's actually no surprise to me because compared to the rest of these blue-collar metal bands, Parkway Drive definitely have the strongest songs. And once again, with these guys, there's definitely no flashy rock star image or anything like that. In fact, as I'm going to talk about in the next section, I think the lack of rock star image in their case and with all these bands, I think is actually a huge part of their success. And that brings us to part 3, Embrace the Grind. In a lot of ways, these bands kind of remind me of my dad. After he got out of the Navy, he was a corrections officer for about 20 years at a maximum security state prison here in Washington. And as you can imagine, that's not the easiest job in the world. It's definitely not the most glamorous, and unfortunately, it doesn't even really pay particularly well. But he went to work every day, he did his job, and by the way, never complained. And now, well, he's enjoying the rewards of all those years of hard work. He's retired and having a great time, loving every minute of it. And that's all because he showed up every day and he put in the work. And that's why I call them blue-collar metal. Because for the most part, they've just spent the last 15 or 20 years grinding it out, putting in the work every day. Let's look at a few specific examples of what I mean, starting with Every Time I Die. Now, I couldn't tell you exactly how many shows Every Time I Die has played, but it's a fucking lot. I would have to think at this point it's probably a couple thousand. They've been on the road for a significant portion of the past 20 years. And look, touring is cool and all that, but at the level they were at when they were starting out, and honestly probably even some of the tours that they do now, it is not glamorous. It's a lot of long drives, shitty diner food, going days and days without showering or doing your laundry. And these days they probably get paid all right, but in the early years they're probably getting a few $100 a night. So that's your reward for driving 12 hours, living on $4 a day is, here you go guys, $180, split 5 ways after you pay for gas. They've had a few video game placements, which I'm sure helped, but really, when I look back at their career, I just see a whole lot of grinding. And I would say the same thing of the Black Dahlia Murder. Again, they've been around for about 20 years, coming out of, I guess, the more metal side of the metalcore scene. And again, they've been grinding pretty much nonstop. They've done every package tour you can think of, from Warped Tour to Summer Slaughter. They put out 8 albums, and they've done, again, a lot of really simple but smart things along the way. Like I said earlier, from my friends who have recorded them, they show up, and from what I hear, they nail their stuff in 1 or 2 or 3 takes, which, considering how fast and crazy their music is, that's pretty impressive. And I've heard some of the raw tracks from those sessions. These are not sloppy takes that they plan on fixing with editing. These are super, super tight performances that really only need a tiny, tiny bit of cleanup before they're ready to mix. That's because they put in the work ahead of time to actually learn the material and practice it until they're super tight, so when they do show up to the studio, it's just a matter of getting the tones and pressing record. And if you're not familiar with recording, that is not normal. Like, a lot of bands, even bigger ones, show up very unprepared. They maybe really haven't practiced the material, the songs might not even be finished, and so they end up wasting a lot of money on studio time. They're paying for studio time when what they're really doing is learning the material or finishing the song in the studio. It sounds pretty stupid, and honestly it is stupid, but it's really common. And to me, the way that Black Dahlia does it is a great example of what I would call that blue-collar metal kind of ethic. They make every dollar count, just like a single mom clipping coupons or something, and because of that, they're able to make records that sound fantastic without spending nearly as much as other bands might. And moving on to August Burns Red, when I think of them, the word that comes to mind is consistency. They've been a band for, I think, 15 years now, and although I personally wouldn't say that any of their music is necessarily the most innovative or original stuff, they're just as consistent as it gets, and there's a lot to be said for that. You know, contrast that with all these bands that put out a brilliant first album that blows everybody away, and then like 3 or 4 shitty albums and everyone kind of writes them off. Or bands that, again, put out a great first album, then totally change their style and alienate their fans and basically flush their career down the toilet. They know what works for them and they stick to it. And lastly, Parkway Drive. Now these days, Parkway Drive is a pretty big band, like I said, especially after switching up their sound on the last few albums, and it seems like they do really well on that like European festival circuit in particular. But what got them to that point was a whole lot of blue-collar grinding in their early days of the band. They're from a small city in Australia called Byron Bay. According to Wikipedia, the population of Byron Bay is only 9,000 people.
We're not used to traffic. We don't
legal where we're from.
Yeah, we don't even have a set of traffic lights in Byron Bay.
And the way that they built their following in the early years of the band was going to other small cities in Australia that at the time no other bands were going to. They would show up there, play their asses off, and earn the fans one show at a time. They did that in Australia, and then they did the same thing in Europe, then America. And international touring is really expensive, so I can't imagine they made any money doing all those tours. In fact, they probably lost money on them, but that was an investment. That's what built them the foundation of the fan base that they have today. And second, there are 2 DVDs that really helped people get to know them as people. It used to puzzle me why they were so popular because, like I said, they're anything but rock stars. They're just these, like, regular dudes from a beach city that play in a metalcore band. What's so special about that, right? But after watching those DVDs, now I understand that's actually exactly why people love them so much. The fact that they're just, like, regular dudes playing in a metalcore band. Those 2 DVDs were just really brilliant pieces of content marketing that really showcased that side of the band and made people fall in love with them. Alright, so you get the idea, and of course there's a lot more to the story of each of these bands, but in broad strokes, I think what it comes down to is something very simple. Putting in the work. They didn't get any big lucky breaks, they never really had a big breakthrough single, and nobody in these bands is a huge star with a beautiful face or mega charisma. They just put in the work, year after year after year. So if you've got a band, a podcast, a YouTube channel, any other kind of creative project that you're trying to build, then by now you've probably already gotten some ideas of what you can learn from these bands, but let me just spell out a few of those things to just really bring it home. Part 4, what all this means for you. First of all, I actually think that this is the model that almost every band or creator in general should try to replicate. These are basically mid-level bands. Parkway Drive might be a little bit bigger than that, but close enough, you get the idea. So they're mid-level bands, but what they have is this tribe of super dedicated fans who will love them and follow them forever. These bands can keep playing music for decades if they want to. Like, they could be playing for 20 or 30 more years, no problem. These are not fair-weather fans. These are lifetime fans. So sure, Every Time I Die isn't the biggest band in the world, but they have longevity, and to me, that's the most valuable thing that any artist can have. Now, this is kind of an admittedly ridiculous comparison, but just to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about, I would way rather be Every Time I Die than, say, Crazy Town, wouldn't you? I mean, Crazy Town is a massive hit song that they still play in Macy's, and your mom can probably sing along to it, and Every Time I Die definitely doesn't have that. But which band has a better career in 2019, right? I personally would rather have this small tribe of really truly dedicated fans for life than blowing up overnight only to fade out just as quickly. And the second thing to take away from this is, like I said in the beginning, you can't control what you were born with. So don't worry about it. Focus on what you can control. Some of us are born with a beautiful face, ridiculous musical talent, or in some cases both, but the vast majority of us aren't. And that's okay. You can still have a great career doing what you love. Because as the old saying goes, and as these bands prove, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Without naming any names, because that's just kind of not how I roll, I'm sure we can all think of some some people or bands who are better looking than any of these guys I talked about and maybe have more raw, natural musical talent than the guys in these bands, but then fucked it all up and flushed their careers down the toilets through laziness, entitlement, or just general stupidity. So don't worry about what you were born with. It's pointless to compare your natural gifts to anybody else's. Instead of doing that, make the most of what you have, because you can't control what you were born with, but you can control how hard you work. And these bands are proof that if you put in the work, it will pay off. It may take years, it may suck at times, but the hard work will always, always, always pay off. And lastly, it's all about consistency. That's the one thing that all these bands have in common, and I think if you look at successful creators of any kind, you'll see the same thing. Success is not a one-time event, like you do this one thing and from now on everything's cool. That's not how it works. It comes from putting in the work consistently over time. It's about showing up every single day and putting in the work whether you feel like it or not. And the reason I'm really focusing on this is because you see a lot of creators who kind of run hot and cold. They'll get excited and put 110% into something for like a week, and then they get bored or lose motivation, and they kind of put it on the back burner and they don't work on it again for a month, and then they wonder why it's not going anywhere. And I get it, we all struggle to find motivation sometimes, but if you want to hit your goals, you've got to find a way to push through those times and put in the work even when you really don't feel like it. I mean, I can guarantee you that there were plenty of days when the guys in these bands woke up in their cold-ass van with $4 in their pockets, and they said, what the fuck am I doing with my life? Should I just like get on the next Greyhound bus home and get a real job? I absolutely guarantee you that everybody in those bands has had that moment. So they heard that little voice in their head, but they didn't listen to it. They told that voice in their head to shut the fuck up, and they got back to work. And at the end of the day, that is exactly why I respect and admire these bands so much. Why I respect them more than I do other bands who may have more natural talent. Because I know that they have earned every single thing that they've accomplished. They earned it by sheer force of will and putting in the work day after day after day, year after year after year. All right, guys, there you go. That is my thoughts on why every band should aspire to be like them. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you like these bands? What do you think we can learn from how they've done things? Do you think that this stuff applies to, you know, any kind of creative project outside of a band? Is there something that we can learn from what they did that would apply to like artwork or a podcast, a YouTube channel? Let me know what you think. And also, I want to thank everybody who's supported me at the true cult level on Patreon. And those people are Andy B, Anthony C, Jeff W, Jordan H, Justin H, Luke S, Michael B, Nicholas G, and Ryan W. Thank you very much. You guys are true cult fans, and I appreciate your support very much. And again, if you're interested in supporting me on Patreon, there's all kinds of cool perks, like you get an audio-only podcast feed of the videos, there's a private Discord server, there's some members-only live Q&As, a bunch of other stuff. So if that sounds interesting, there's a link to that Patreon in the description. And with that, I'm going to sign out for now, but I will see you next time.